Looks like the stream is starting up. Let's give it a second to go. In the meantime, I'm going to show a pretty picture. Oh, isn't that a pretty picture? Maybe it's not so pretty for anybody on the East Coast. Probably not. So yeah, that's Hurricane Matthew churning out in the Bahamas right now. I've been following it. There's a weather blog on Wonderground, wunderground.com. Jeff Masters, he does a weather blog and he talks about hurricanes all the time. It's always so interesting to read about all the different dynamics that go into them, but fascinating yet still terrifying because of the implications of it all. So anyway, that's going to be the little loop for now, but that's not actually what we're going to be talking about today. Let's switch my person to the cat. The cat. Load up the page. And we're going to look at today, all the way down here, most of these commands. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Anyway, yeah, we're going to look at the state commands today because I'm working on this for my WebdriverIO course, and it's on my mind. So I figure that's a pretty good thing to talk about today, and that's what we'll be doing. To do that, I'm going to bring some HTML over. And what else am I going to load? So I've got that. Let's load the local site. Actually, let's not do that. Let's do WebdriverIO course content. That should, yeah, loads this page. And what else? So I need that. Oop, not there yet. So this is a Robot Parts Emporium. It's not an actual store. If I get enough demand for it, maybe we'll create a Robot Parts Emporium store. But for now, it's just like a fake e-commerce site. Has all the basic stuff that you would see on an e-commerce site. And the more important thing is that it has lots of interactions like drop-down menus and modal windows that pop up and robots that dance because you know, they're so happy. And you've got these sliders here up top and all these sorts of things. You've got like an accordion menu here and fun things that you can test throughout. So today what we are going to, I don't ever know, should I say we or what I'm going to do or what you should do? I know like for this, it shouldn't be what you'll be doing because you're just watching and hopefully eating something delicious, whether it's lunch or dessert or both. But yeah, I feel like in my tutorial videos, I go with we'll be watching or we'll be doing this or we'll do that because, you know, it's like a family thing, but I don't know, it's always weird. Anyway, yeah, here's like this breadcrumbs and select boxes, and then you can put quantities and stuff like that, and you can click buy now and it does nothing. But for what we want to check out is this review section where we can add a review. So test at example.com. This product is evil. Yeah, and then we hit submit review, and it looks like I need to update my GitHub pages course. This is the live course, so I will do that right now on the other screen while y'all wait. github.com/klamping/WebdriverIO course content. Oh, you know what I need to do? I know what I need to do. I need to run npm run gh pages, and that will publish it. Okay, now it says that it's published. And let's see, if we add something wrong, it says that we need to, it's got some validation on it. Nope, still not updated. Sometimes it takes a second for it to update. The problem is that it clears out the form every single time. There we go. Now we have a new review, and we can keep adding. And really, it should clear out this text every time that you leave a review or something, or maybe get rid of this box so that things like that. But for now, this is the functionality that we'll be testing out. So what I mentioned is that we're going to be going through some different state commands. I keep clicking on them wrong. So there's like has focus, is enabled, is existing, is selected, is visible within viewport. You notice all of these have a verb at the beginning. I think that's a verb. Is maybe it's an adjective. I don't know my English. It has like has focus or has or is, and what that implies is that it returns a value that defines whether this is true or false, whether that's correct or wrong. So if we want to see if something is existing, it's going to return true if at least one element is existing by the given selector. So what that means is if the element is existing on the page, then it's going to return true. So you can see here we've got 4 elements, each with a specific ID, and they all have different visibilities set to them. But all of them are going to output true here because all we're doing is checking for is existing. Now there was another one down here called is visible. That's going to check the visibility of that element and will return true or false depending on whether it's visible or not. But here we have some random non-existing element that isn't in our HTML, and it returns false because it's not existing. So what I want to do first is in my test, I'm going to go to the review page. I'm going to add a review, and then I'm going to validate that the text is existing. So I've actually already done this on another in this file, but I'm basically going to repeat all these steps and move that off screen and bring a new one over here, just so that we can go through all the scripts or steps ourselves. So the first thing we're going to do is create a describe block. I've got a Mocha Sublime text plugin that kind of expands out everything, that makes it a bit easier to write out my tests. So that's a really cool little thing. So what am I going to describe? The review form, and then I'm going to create my first test. Actually, let's just outline all the different things it should do. So it should add a comment, or add a review when submitted properly. What else it should do? It should show an error message if the input is wrong. So what that is saying is that if I enter a bad email address, it should show this error message. It should also, when I correct it, I don't want it to stay wrong. So now that I've corrected it, it goes away. So let's say it should hide the error message when input is corrected. Ooh. Okay, and then one other thing that I think is important is when I hit submit review and I don't have, oh, that's interesting. This is a bug in some code that I wrote last night. Basically, it used to not do anything, but because this is just dumb JavaScript that I wrote, if you see my product page here, it's all the way down at the bottom. What it does, it prevents the default. I'm not actually checking to see whether the form is valid or not. I was kind of assuming that since I'm using this data abide, which is a foundation plugin, that it would automatically keep that event from firing, but apparently it doesn't. Anyway, what I wanted to see is that when I hit submit review, the focus moves to the first field that doesn't have a correct value in it. So if I have something like that and then I hit submit review, it should focus on this field. That way I'm like, okay, now I just need to enter my content there. Or if both are wrong, then it would jump to the email address field so that I can easily start working on that email address. this is kind of an accessibility thing. There are other things that you could do, which is focus on the error itself. It kind of depends on how you want to write that. So I'm not going to get too much into the accessibility side of things, and I'm not going to say that this is 100% the way that you should always do it for accessibility. I just, for this test, I need to test whether this element has focus or not. And so that's what I'm going to be doing, is saying, okay, so it should set focus on this element. So that's why I'm doing it like this. Please, no chastising if you do see me doing accessibility wrong, because accessibility is tough. And the other thing I want to do is move that up. I need to have the error review above the error message because it makes more sense to have it there. Okay, so as I was saying, I'm describing this, so it should focus on the first invalid on error. Okay, that's a pretty good thing. Let's see if I, yeah, those are the ones that I want to go through today. So the first one is it should add a review when submitted properly. So I'm just gonna cut that out and then hit it. Should add a review when done properly. The Mocha plugin adds done. We don't need done since we're doing everything asynchronously. Synchronously with WebDriver 4.0. We don't need the done callback. So I'm just gonna take that out. You'll see me do that a couple of times. But first thing we're gonna do is go to our product page. And that's this HTML, or this URL right here. This is going to be saved. This file is going to be saved to my course content here. Actually, it's going to be, hold on, let me find this. Course content test. Okay, it's going to be in this course content folder. You can actually download this website if you want. It's open source. It's just on GitHub. And it's just a basic sample site here that has, here's my product page, here's my index page and everything. And installation is pretty simple. You just run npm install, and then you run npm start to run it locally. So I actually have this running locally here. So if I kill this process, I just run npm start on it and it starts it up. So I can test this locally. So that's really where I'm going to be testing. Let's go ahead and jump there instead. So that way I don't have to worry about GitHub pages updating. So yeah, here's the product page that I want to test, and then add a good email, hit enter, and you see it adds it right there. Okay, and I did want to say, if you want to see how to install that, the first few lessons on the course are free, so you can jump into that. All you got to do is, let's see, yeah, enroll for the course. It's completely free. Once you hit create account, it should take you to the course admin page, or not course admin, the course overview page, where you can access these 4 videos right away. This first one is the installation walkthrough of this website. So anyway, all that's free for you to check out if you want to check it out. Back to the test. So we need to load the product page. We've done that. Next thing we're going to do is set the value in our URL. Or sorry, not in our URL. We're going to set the value in this box right here to something simple, to an email address. So I'm going to inspect this box because I need to get the ID out of it. Okay, so it has an ID of review email. Most forms will have an ID or a name on them, and you can use those for selecting stuff. So yeah, feel free to do that. And I'm gonna jump back to my thing, and I'll do browser.setValue. And then the first thing I pass into my set value is the selector of the element that I want to set the value on. And then I'll do my example.com, my value that I want to actually set it. This uses the set value, command, which is right here. Again, it takes a selector and then the value that you want to set. You can also use add value, which is very similar to set value. The only thing that set value does differently is that it clears out the existing input in there, whereas add value just adds the value to whatever's already in there. So you see here it's asserting that the value is equal to test123, which is the two of these because we used add value. If we switch these two around, it would actually just be test because it would have erased 1, 2, 3 and replaced it with test. So we want to do set value because we want to clear out whatever is in there for our test. Okay, so we set the value for the review email. Next up, we're going to set the value for the review content, which I think is the ID. Let me just double check. So I jump into here and I say review content. Okay, that's good. And then my content will be, this is my review. And then the last thing I'm going to do is submit my form using the submit form method. And to submit the form, that's another action that you'll be calling. Yeah, right here, submit form. And you just pass in the selector. And something that I learned the other day is that it doesn't have to be specifically the form itself. It can actually be any element that's a descendant of the form element. So it can be review content or review email, which is kind of neat. I don't have to look up whether that form has an ID or anything like that. I think it does, but yeah. So we've got browser submit form, and then here I'm going to do my debug. Not like that. I'm going to do my debug so that before I do any of my assertions, I'm just going to double check that it actually submitted my form. And because I'm doing a debug, I'll set the timeout to some high number so that it doesn't time out on me and stop my test. Okay, so that's that. My Selenium session is running over here. I don't have to do this anymore now that I figured out how to use the plugin, the Selenium standalone plugin. But this is how I set it up a while back, so I'm just going to keep with it. Let's go ahead and clear that, and then I'll run npm test. One other thing is, if you look at my test directory, there's multiple files in here. I only want to run the review file, so I'm going to do npm test, and I'm going to pass in the spec option, which gives me a single file to view, sorry, a single file to run. This would be review.js. Notice the double dashes. That's because I'm using npm for my, because I'm using the npm script commands, npm test. Using a double dash basically passes it to the next item. And I think, yeah, I think I've talked about that before. I'm not really sure. Anyway, let's run that. Review.js is not found. Oh, I have a bad path. Test/review.js. Let's see if this works. So what should happen is somewhere in here. Okay. The test failed because of something. Why did the test fail? I'm not too surprised that it actually failed because this is all off the cuff. It looks like it didn't actually do anything. What I'm going to do now is jump into my configuration file, and oh, I forgot I had the debug option. Sweet. I want to set my log level to verbose because I want to see what happened. Another thing I can do is look at this error shots directory. I may do that next, but for now I'll just do this. Okay, so it went to the URL. Something bad happened with the URL, so it took a screenshot. I'm guessing it didn't load the page properly. Let's see if I open that up. Just a second while I open this up. Okay, so here's the screenshots that just got taken. Here you see one's taken. Oh, that's weird. Oh, okay. What? That's not good. So it took a screenshot of the page that the browser was, or sorry, the monitor that the browser was running on. And because I had moved the browser, it actually didn't take a screenshot of it. So that's kind of funny. See, that URL doesn't seem correct to me. But why would the URL not be working? It should be working. Strange. Okay, let's see. Back in here, browser.url, page, product page. Maybe it needs a slash. I bet it needs a slash. That's probably what I did wrong. Let's try it again. Yes, it needed a slash. So you see it's got all that URL now. Okay, now it's paused. So let's pop that up. Okay, here's my content, and you see it added the review right here. This doesn't get stored to a database, so that's why it basically refreshes every time, because this is just a dumb JavaScript thing. So what we might want to do is actually make sure in another test that it stores to the database just by loading it and double checking after that. So we do know that the review goes in correctly. So the last thing I want to do is validate that this text is correct, or sorry, that this text is existing on the page. So the way I'll do that is I'm going to select an element with a class of comment, and that has the text, "This is my review." And so I can end my test. I'll hit enter, and I'm going to use is existing. So I can get rid of this browser debug in the timeout, and I'll say variable review exists, or maybe has review is equal to. So this is going to be the variable that is going to be true or false depending on what this browser command comes back as. So is existing, and then I'm going to pass in a selector. This is going to be a p of comment, so a paragraph with the class of comment, and then I'm going to use the equal sign. This is a special Selenium thing that selects by text. So here I'm going to say a paragraph with the class of comment that has the exact text, "This is my review." Okay, and then let's run that again, and we should see that it actually passes the test. And while it's doing this, I'm going to get rid of that verbose log level. And I could have passed that log level in from the command line if I wanted to, but I didn't, so I didn't. Anyway, it says that it passed, so that's great. Let's just double check that it fails if I don't have the right text in there. So here's just junk in my test, and I should double check that it's going to fail. That's always a good thing, because you never know whether it's passing because you were smart or it's passing because you were dumb. And yeah, so here you see it passes because I'm dumb. Because I forgot that I need to not just check whether it's existing or not, or well, I need to not just get that value, I need to assert it as well. Oh, that's why you do those things, because you can think that you've got everything figured out, but apparently, I completely forgot to do the assertion itself. So now I'm going to expect has review to be true, and I'm also going to pass in a message in case has review isn't true. So comment test exists, and the reason, I'll show you the reason why real quick when we run this. Basically, the error message that comes back says expected true to be false or expected false to be true. That's not really helpful, especially if you're like on Jenkins or a CI/CD environment where this is your only error message. It's not really useful. So instead, I'm going to say comment text exists, and this is going to get prepended to that error message. So if I run this again, and we did want this to fail because we added that junk text in there. You see now it says comment text exists, expected false to be true. So this kind of points, okay, this specifically is where we were expecting the content to be correct. Okay, so I'll remove that junk text, run the test again, and now it passes. Great. One thing that we could do is also validate when we load the page that the comment text doesn't exist. So I'm going to check that that's false. So basically I just copied this top part. Before I run my test, I want to make sure that this text doesn't exist. That way I know that these actions actually added the text to the page. So that's another reason to have this here. Does not exist. Because if one of these failed, you wouldn't really know which one it is without this description text in place. So let's save that. I'll run it again. And really it shouldn't make any difference. It's going to make the test a little bit longer, but it's going to be a lot more in depth, or a lot more bulletproof in that instance. Okay, so that is existing. Again, it doesn't matter what visibility it is. So that's, you know, not entirely ideal. Maybe we'd want to use something that doesn't just check that it's existing, that it also checks that it's visible. This is probably a better check because we want to make sure that it both exists on the page and is visible on the page, or isn't visible, kind of thing. So yeah, I'll actually keep this as is existing because I just want to make sure that this isn't anywhere on the page. I don't care if it's visible or not. I don't want it on the page because that means that this test is a bit more fragile and things could be interacting with it outside of the test itself. So yeah, I'll use browser.isVisible here. And what isVisible does, if I go to it, is visible, will check, again, you just pass in a selector and it's going to check the visibility. So here we've got like display none is a visibility thing, visibility hidden. You can position something off the page, or you can have a 0 opacity. And here we see, let's see, not display, display none, output's false. So basically that's not visible. The next thing we want to check is not visible. So if we have visibility to hidden, then it's going to output false. Not existing, that is basically saying this element doesn't exist on the page. So it's kind of like is existing. It's going to also output false. But here's some interesting things. If you don't have it in the viewport, so basically it's off the side of the page using absolute positioning, it's still going to return true because you're just checking to see if the element is visible, not whether it's visible in the viewport. And that's kind of interesting. There is, down on the bottom of the page, there's is visible within viewport that you could use to be more certain that it's in the viewport. But the problem is, I think the viewport is just what you're looking at. So if I wanted to check if the title of this page is visible at the very top of the page, and I used is visible within viewport, I believe it wouldn't actually, it would say that it's false, even though technically the title or whatever the menu bar is visible. It's just not within the viewport at that given time. So, and then the last thing is that if you have an opacity set to 0, it's going to say that it's visible. I think that's just because it's really hard to tell programmatically whether something is visible or not, whether it be, depending on if it has opacity. Because if your opacity is set to like 0.2, but it's contrasted against a really strong background, then maybe it is visible, compared to if it's 0.2 white text on a gray background, then maybe it's not really visible. You know, you kind of get into an iffy area there. So I think with this command, they're just trying to check are the main visibility things, display none, visibility hidden, are those set? And if so, is it visible or not? All that said, let's get to our error message to try out this isVisible command in a little bit more use. So actually I want to do it should, and then I'll get rid of that. Because I'm using the browser URL, or sorry, this product page every time, I'm going to move this to a before each loop, or not before each loop, before each hook, before each, and let me see, that doesn't expand out. Aw. I was hoping that my auto expander would work. And I'm going to move browser.url up here. So basically, before each of my functions, or each of my tests, it's going to load the page. And what this is good for is that it allows us to have a consistent starting point for all of our tests. I'm not going to have data from this test kind of getting in the way of this test here. So, okay, should show an error message if the input is wrong. The first thing we want to do is make sure that no error message is showing. So we're going to use has error message, kind of what we did on this first one. And unlike the first one where I use browser.isExisting, I need to use isVisible because the error message is actually on the page. If I jump over to my product page HTML, you can see the error message is here. It just has a style of display none. Same thing goes for this form error. Inside the CSS, I have a form error class, and it has a display of none as well. So this text is existing. This element exists on the page, but it's not visible. So that's why we need to use isVisible versus isExisting. So I'm just going to say there are some errors in your review. I just want to double check that this is not visible. So jump into here. Is visible. I will do a element with a class alert and call out. I'm trying to figure out what the selector for this would be, because I do want to check the text. Actually, I guess I could use comment form and then alert. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so this is basically just targeting this element right here. And I want to make sure that it's not is error. Yeah, let's change it to that. And then we'll expect error visible. We'll say error should not be showing to be false. So I'm going to check that my alert error isn't visible. Let's go ahead and run that. I'm going to try using only. I don't know if only is going to work or not. There's been some issues with it lately on my box. I don't know why. But basically, only will run just that one test. So we should just see that one is passing, not two passing, even though we have two tests. Because, okay. Because only says only run this test. That's a Mocha thing. And then if I change this to true, then it should fail. Again, I want to make sure that I can get my test to fail because it happens so quickly. I'm not specifically certain that it's doing everything right, but because it failed, we do know that yes, it didn't find it correctly. Okay, so now what I want to do is let's see, I'm going to set my value and my email. I want to make sure that works, and then I'm going to submit my content before I add in any review content. So I'm going to submit the form, and then I'm going to make sure that my error message is now showing. So I'll do is error visible again. I'll check this element, and then I'll expect it to be true. Error message should show. And I'll use is visible again. If I used is existing, both of these would fail, or this one would fail because it's existing on the page before it starts. Let's try running that. Okay, now it passes, which is what we were expecting. And then to validate that it's a good test, I'm actually going to add the correct content in. So an error message shouldn't show because it's got the correct content in there. While that runs, just check some other stuff. Okay, so you see it actually added it in there and it failed because it was expecting false to be true. Basically, it was expecting this value to be true. It was expecting the error message to be true. Okay, so yeah, that's that. There's a couple other things that we can do here. If I go back to the page, when I add a review, so this is basically what I'm doing, and I hit submit review, I'm checking that this is visible, but I'm not checking that this review text, or sorry, this comment text itself is visible. Let's just worry about that some other time. So some other time being next. That is visible. Let me check my notes because I want to make sure I covered that. Yeah, let's do the next part. Should hide the error messages when the input is corrected. So we're going to do is visible again for this one. And I'm just going to copy most of this test. When you end up copying tests, there's always this fine line of should it be with the main test or should it be its own test? And I don't know. That I say fine line. It's a very fuzzy line actually, and I don't really know. I think you just got to play it by ear and hope, you know. Don't spend too much time worrying about it. If you end up having to copy and paste a lot of tests, maybe look at creating a page object if you can. Otherwise, just be happy that you have tests and they work and things like that. Instead of checking comment form alert, we're going to check a different value. This time it's going to be this one. So it's going to be form error. And we can't just check form error because there are two of these. Let me jump back here. Because form error is a pretty common class name, I want to specify that it's comment form specifically. All these specifications. The other thing is that there's actually two form errors. There's one here as well. That's for the email address. So we have to be a little bit more specific. And I'm going to double check that this text is part of that error. So a review without text isn't much of a review is the text that we should be checking for. I'm moving it to a variable because it's getting kind of lengthy as a selector. And if I'm going to be using it in multiple places and my text changes, then I don't want to have to change it in multiple places. I want to just change it in this one variable. Okay, so is error visible? We check to see that it's not showing to begin with. We set our email address. We submit the form. We check that it's visible again. Now, oops, press the wrong hotkey. Now I'm going to move this down and I'm going to set the value of content to be this. Okay, I'm not going to submit the form because I don't want the value to go away, but I am going to check is error visible one last time and expect it to be false. Should be hidden. And basically what this is doing is, I'll just manually do it. I go in, I hit submit review without typing it in, the error message shows, I type in an error message, and then it goes away. Now you saw one thing that I had to do, maybe you didn't see it, is lose focus. So even though I've entered text, because it's still focused on this input box, it hasn't gotten rid of the review. And so my guess is that the same thing's going to happen when I run my test. So this test is probably going to fail at the very end, around the part that it says that the error message should be hidden again. And I'll say again because I kind of want to show that it's not the first time that it should be hidden. Kind of thing. Okay, and back to here, and it passed. Why did it pass? Maybe it hit it. Let's see. I'm just gonna run it and see if I can get the website. Okay, the browser to show. So adds a review. Oh, what's going on? What changed? That's kind of interesting. I must have not saved it or something. I think that's what happened. Okay, so that last one fails because there was a bad selector. And I'm guessing it was a bad selector because of the combination of comment form space form error. This is a CSS selector. This is a text selector. And I think with both of those, you can't quite combine them that easily. So instead, what I'm going to do is say browser.element. I'm going to get the comment form element. No. Yes. Okay, I'm going to get the comment form element. And then I'm going to get a sub element of that, which matches here. Okay, so basically I nested two elements. Browser.element returns an element that I can run another element command on. Element is just a selector. If we look at the element page, it's just a way to get a element reference by a selector. There's also elements here. That's multiple elements instead of just one element. So what I'm doing is I'm getting the comment form. I'm narrowing it down to the comment form first, and then I'm searching for that error. And because it doesn't have a space in it, it's a lot happier with this. And I think this might have to be a paragraph. Let's see. So I think the only other thing is that this is probably going to fail. Let's just double check that it fails. I'm thinking it's going to fail because it was expecting to have a string selector before, and now it has an actual element itself, and that's not ideal. So 2 passed, 1 failed. It looks like it really errored out. I'm going to put only on here so that it's not running my other 2 tests. And I think it really had an issue here with error message showing. So, sorry, with error message as an element instead of a selector. What I'm wondering is if I can just pass in error message and then check if it's visible. I don't think I can do this, but let's try it out. And that's actually where page objects come in to play, is that ability to do that sort of thing. Oh, I guess I can. Oh, I really like WebdriverIO 4.0 because it does have things like this, and it seems like that works. Let's set that to true. And oops, I don't want to start. I want to run. So now I'm just making sure that it fails. Right, so it failed. Oh my God, that's beautiful. So I'll uncomment this, and I'm going to get rid of error message here. And then I'm going to pass in error message here. So now I have this element, and this element has these kind of syntax commands added to them, is visible on that element itself. That's super cool because now your test is a little bit more readable. So error message is visible. I could even get rid of this is error visible and just have error message is visible there. I kind of like that. That's a little bit cleaner from a test perspective. I always worry about adding too much in my assertion. It's kind of a, yeah, it's a mix between, is this too much to assert? Is it too hard? Does it make it too hard to read or not? You just kind of have to, again, use your best judgment there. And let's see if this works. Error message should show, so it expected the is visible to be true. Maybe, well, I'll debug here. and check it. Okay. Whoops. Oh, so it failed. Sorry. The test failed before my debug statement came. So that's why it hid right away. So the text is there, so that's working properly. Maybe I was wrong about this kind of thing. Let's see. Let's do this the old-fashioned way. Instead of checking that, we're going to here. And the other thing I'm going to do is get rid of this and just say check is visible. Form error view without text isn't much of a review. The other thing that could be happening is that it could be searching for this and not finding it just because this isn't a good selector. So basically, you know, it's trying to find whether this element is visible. So what we could do is say is existing. And this won't necessarily go in our final test, existing, but it will. It's a decent way to debug whether we found the right element or not. So we're going to expect this to be true and see what comes from that. And then I'm going to get rid of that debug. And let's see what goes on there. Expected false to be true. Okay, so basically there's something wrong with this selector. It might be the nesting of the elements inside of each other. So this should return true because I should at least have a form element or a form error element on the page. Yeah, okay. So it passed through the first one. It failed still, but because the first one doesn't have an error message associated with it, it just says expects false to be true. I know that it did pass through that. Okay, so there's something up with this text right here. And I think, let's see what's going on. So what does our error message look like? There's a period at the end of this. And because I'm using the equals, that's looking for this exact text. So I didn't have a period in my text. Let's see if that's the problem. Error message should show expected false to be true. So it at least passed through this. That's good. It failed because it was using this old selector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to here, switch back to the error message is visible style, because I know, or I'm fairly certain it's not this style that's causing the problem. It's just because my selector was off. That was the issue there. I'll get rid of that because I don't need that anymore. I'll get rid of the browser debug. And this should now pass. I should be able to set my value and it should all pass now if everything goes according to plan. Expected true to be false. Okay, so that's actually, now that I remember, that's correct because we set the value, we didn't lose focus on it. So it never actually hid that error message. So what we need to do is change the focus. How do we do that? I don't know. Let's see, is there a focus? There's has focus. There are actually a few ways that we could do that. We could click on something else. So we type and then we click on the page. That'll hide it. We can also, when we type and hit, we can hit the tab key. That would do it. So I think the easiest way is probably just to hit the tab key. So I'm going to use the keys command. Actually, is it keys? No, I'm just going to click. That's going to be so much easier. Is just to click. So I will do browser.click, and then I'll just click the body of the page. The only issue, okay, it's going to click the, where does it click? I think it clicks, click on an element. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out where it clicks. Clicks an element based on the given selector. So all of these commands link to some very basic, basically they call some very basic Selenium commands. So in here, what it's doing is it's running this.elementID click, and it's getting the element selector for you. So that's what's neat about all of this, is that it's just running Selenium commands behind the scenes. So here it gets the value of the element and then clicks by that ID based off of this stuff. Anyway, if that doesn't make sense, that's perfectly fine, because it doesn't need to make sense for you. What I wanted to see is element ID click is what it uses. And I need to see element ID click. That's a Selenium command that we're calling, I think, JSON wire protocol. Obsolete. Let's try this. And there should be element ID click in here. There isn't. I could be wrong. Okay. So it's calling element ID click. I need to look under the protocol. So I'm going to go to the library and protocol. There's going to be an element ID click, I think. Yeah, here. And let's see what it's actually calling. It's sending a HTTP request to our session with the element of ID and hitting the click. Okay. So I was wrong. Element ID click, that's actually a WebdriverIO feature. What Selenium is doing is just clicking on that element. All of this is, here you see our element states. Element click. All of this is just to see where it clicks. So it clicks at the center point of the element. So if I say body, it's going to click right in the middle of wherever the body is. So here's my body. So it's probably going to click like right here. And that could actually be bad if my buy now button is there, or if a link is there, that sort of thing. That would not be ideal. So instead, I think what I'll do is I'm going to click this element itself, and it should disappear. Okay. That's what I'll do, is I will do error message.click. I think the easier way to do all of this is just to use the tab key. I just didn't want to mess with the keys and everything, because you've got to figure out what the right command is for that. I don't think you can just type in tab. And then there's sometimes with keyboard focus, it can have issues in Firefox and things like that. So it passes. Okay, that's great. It hit our message and everything. Last thing we're going to do, because I'm kind of running out of time, is we'll do this has focus real quick. Oops. Wrong command. Okay. Should focus on the first invalid input error, and this is going to fail because it actually doesn't do that, but I'll copy all the way down to here. I don't care about my error messages. So what I'm going to do is set my value on review email, submit the form, and then check to see that this review email has the focus. And because I'm going to be reusing this, I can just say variable email input equals browser.element. And then I can use this email input later on. Actually, let's see. I think I can do this, email input.setValue, and then browser.submitForm. I wonder if I could even do email input.submitForm. Let's test. And then I'm going to say has focus. Expect email input has focus to be true. So we're expecting it to be true. Let's see if that's true. Try it out. Oh, it's not going to run the right one because I still have only set up here. That's usually what happens with only, is you forget about it. Let's try this again. Expected false to be true. Okay, I think that's actually what we wanted, because it's not actually setting the focus back to the input, the email input area. The only thing about this is there could also be 100 other reasons why this isn't working. I'm trying to think if I have anything in here that actually does move the focus. If you want to get the active element, you can use document.activeElement, and that'll tell you what the active element is. That's basically your focused element. I'm just trying to see. Let me think. Oh, I know what has it. If I go home and I click here, let me think. So what I'm thinking is that either one of these, when you click them, they should still be focused. Same thing goes for here. When you click this link should still be focused. So let's test that instead. And this is just going to be a throwaway test because I was expecting has focus to actually work, and so I can test it out and everything. But because it's not working, and I don't want to mess with getting the JavaScript written in time and all that sort of stuff, I'm just going to go to the home page. I'm going to change email input to be this fax item. Let me see. So fax links. No, actually I want the second one, because what I want to do is click here, double check that it has focus. Yeah, that's all I want to do. Because so all I need to do is get an element with this text. So it's a link that has that text in it. So second FAQ browser.element is equal to that. I don't think I have to do the A, because I think by default it checks for link text, and because it's a link it should check for that. So when I first go to the page, I'm going to expect that second fax has focus should be false. Should not be focused on page load, and then to be false. And then I'm going to click it and then expect the opposite, that it's true, should be focused after click. And I'm going to say that as remain focused, because basically what we want to check is that the focus doesn't jump up to the top of the page or something, which could happen if in your HTML, because it's a link, it's going to by default want to jump to the top of the page because it's got this href on it. But with the JavaScript I'm using, it is it's interfering with that. So if the JavaScript I had on the page didn't load, then it would actually jump that focus back to the top of the page. And I could actually show you that, I think, if this works. I'll quickly show that by just disabling the JavaScript for it, and it should lose focus. Expected false to be true. second facts.click. Let's do perhaps has focus only checks input elements. Let's see. Selector DOM element currently has focus. I mean, it doesn't say anything in there, so. Oh, that's interesting. The autofocus. Autofocus is a little HTML thing, HTML attribute that uses it. Let's see what's in. It uses execute. So if I go to the source, what I'm guessing is that it checks active element. Okay. So it runs execute. Execute is a WebdriverIO command that runs just whatever JavaScript you want on the page. So here it's checking the document active element. Let's manually test this by clicking here. Oh, shoot. Okay, yeah, I mean, it still says that it's focused. I thought it wasn't going to be because I had to click on the console, and that makes the background disappear. But the active element still remains the same. So when I click on that, it gets that one. So yeah, looking back in here, it gets the focused element. If it's not focused or the focus is equal to the body, then it's going to return false. Otherwise, if we have the query selector, which is just a JavaScript thing, if that's available, then check to see if the element focused, which is the element that it's a active element, matches the way that we do the query selector. So what we could do for that to test this is say document active element is equal to $0. And $0 will actually get in the console, it's going to return the element that you have selected in the console. So if I do $, that $, there. I was saying it correctly. I wasn't typing it correctly. Okay, so this should return true. It does. Okay, that's good. And that makes sense because, well, it doesn't. Yeah, so this should return false. Okay. So yeah, something's going up. We're clicking it. We're checking focus again. We're expecting it to be true. We've got the second facts. Okay, so I'm just going to debug. That's what I'm going to do next. And jump into the test. So we're here, we've clicked it. It's there, it looks like it's focused and everything. Press the enter key and it still fails. Expected false to be true. Expected the element, I mean, it's not that it needs to wait because the debug is basically making it wait. I don't know what's going on. Should remain focused after click. Expect it to be true. That is strange. If anybody has any ideas, throw it out in chat because I don't know what's going on. It should be focused. It's not. Anyway, that's how you'd use it. I'm not going to wait too long because we've already gone past an hour here. And yeah, I've got to get back to work and stuff. So yeah, that's that. That's how has focus should work. Not really sure why it's not working. I'll look into that again. There's also is enabled. This is going to check a, I think it's, yeah, a input, whether the input is enabled or not. And if it's set to disabled, then it's going to be false. That's kind of good if you want to check, if you've got like a dynamic form that does certain things, that hides certain data or maybe disables something if you have something wrong or choose a certain option, that's helpful. There's is selected, that's for select boxes, basically to check that a specific value or a specific option is selected. That's good. The other ones are is visible, which we went over, and then is visible within viewport, which again checks the viewport, and you see not in viewport will return false because it's not in the viewport. And then I guess with 0 opacity, it also checks that sort of thing, that basically it's out of the viewport. And I guess anything above 0, it'll say true. I don't know if that's the truth or not. I could check that pretty quickly, but I don't want to. But yeah, that's is visible within viewport. Yeah, cool stuff. Those are your element state commands. And yeah, I'm working on turning this whole hour of content into a more condensed set of maybe 4 different videos, 3 or 4 different videos that I'm gonna have up on my course if you want to check it out. So yeah, that's this course, learnwebdriverio.com or learn.webdriver.io. It's the same page, just a kind of an easier way to get there. But yeah, that's what I'm working on next here. So these element state commands, hey, look, it says in development. And then the last thing I'll get to on this side is the wait commands. So that's that. Thanks for watching along, and hope it was helpful.